Hi, Keith Smith here, and we're starting a new video series that we're going to run through November, in which we want to sit down and talk to the candidates for all the local and state and possibly federal elections. Talk to them a little bit about things that they stand for, the positions, the concerns, and we're actually going to start this week with Billy Matthews, chair of the Republican Party here in Pendleton County, and we'll also have another video, accompanying video, with Roger McKinney, who is the chair of the Democrat Party. And felt that was a good place to start, talk a little bit about what's going on with their party here in the county, the candidates they're putting forth, and just have a conversation. I told Billy before we started, I don't like the words interview, I just like having talks with people and conversations. So kind of calling this Conversations with Keith. I got my little Diet Snapple drink, got over here from Falmouth BP Food Mart, and let's get started.
All right.
All right. First question simply is, how'd you become a Republican?
I remember going back, probably my first thoughts or my first memories of politics would be actually in the stripping room on the farm.
Now, just for those of you who don't work on a farm, that's tobacco stripping.
That is
just
correct.
Wanted to clear that up.
That is correct. But I remember my great uncle, Jim Roseberry, was a magistrate when I was young. And so this is way before cell phones or anything like that. But we would be stripping tobacco in the room, and I would realize that people would come in to the room, stripping room, and Uncle Jim and that person would go off to the corner of the room or something and kind of have a conversation and talk. And I just thought it was common practice. You know, people would visit stripping rooms and stuff all over the county. Well, come to find out later on, it's other magistrates and stuff, and they would come and talk business and politics and just check on the family and do things like that. But I remember that's probably some of the first memories I have of like local politics is stripping room, and then the conversations after the guest would leave or something like that. And so you learn a lot in the stripping room, the tobacco stripping room. So. But I remember the first presidential election. It was kind of that I can recall was Clinton. I think in '94. I was in third or fourth grade or something like that, and I just got to. My family's always been pretty conservative. I was always told that they didn't even vote for FDR back in the Depression times, because the motto was, if you didn't work, you don't eat. So I don't think that my family, a bunch of farmers, thought that welfare programs were fair for the working class and things like that. So, but we've always been fairly conservative. I've listened to stories from my grandparents and what they believed in, and I just feel like the conservative message, the Republican message, is more to what our families, I don't know. I don't know if you call it a motto or theme or what it would be, but we're just more conservative-minded people than the left-leaning liberal group.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in working with the Republican Party here locally, as well as what you do now.
Actually, it's a great story. About 5 or 6 years ago, my cousin, Bill Roseberry, asked if I wouldn't come on and join a newly formed Pendleton County Executive Committee, Republican Party Executive Committee, and be the treasurer. And he said, you're not going to have a lot of work to do because there's not that many Republicans, and there's less money than Republicans. So I said, fine, if you tell me what to do, I'll figure it out. So Bill started the new executive committee, and I came on as the treasurer. And after a few years, Bill resigned, and then I was elected the chairman. And since then, I guess I've been chairman for about 4 years now, I think. So I can blame Bill Roseberry for that, for getting me involved in this. But it's led to a lot of great opportunities for me as well.
Well, how has since you've been involved locally? Well, you didn't tell us about what you do with the Republican Party outside of Pendleton County.
Well, that is correct. Not only am I the chairman of the Republican Party here in the county, but I'm also the Northern Kentucky field representative for Senator Rand Paul, for our federal senator. Now, that position is not a political position. I work for the United States Senate, I'm paid by the Senate, taxpayer dollars,
Okay.
in the office of Senator Rand Paul.
Okay.
So technically, Senator Paul is my boss, but I'm paid. I'm a Senate employee. So that is not a campaign or a political position.
So what do you do in that position?
I am the field rep. So what I do is I have 11 counties in northern Kentucky, from Trimble County all the way up to northern Kentucky up 71, and then I go south to Pendleton, Harrison, Grant, O. So that's kind of my district. And what I do is I attend meetings. I represent the senator if there are bridge dedications or sign dedications. I attend those in his honor. I'll make speeches. I'll read letters from him to whatever organization it is putting on the event. Also, we have a great constituent services organization in our state office, which is down in Bowling Green. And there's about 7 or 8 ladies down there who I will find. I'm supposed to seek out and find the problems. Let's say you're having a problem, or your parents are having problems getting Social Security benefits, or your father lost his military medals or something like that. Maybe you're trying to go out of country and you lost your passport. Every one of those federal programs or anything like that, I will contact you to our state office in Bowling Green, and those ladies will create a case file for you and help you walk through or themselves they will do the work for you depending on your availability. And help you get your passport or get your medals, your father's medals back, or your mother's Social Security benefits. A lot of times people will have problems with the VA or something like that. They won't know who to contact or what avenue to get their medication or things like that.
So I'm hearing you say with that, because I'm in the process of been talking with VA with my father.
Yes.
And so if there's an issue of any of our senior citizens, any parents of senior citizens out there dealing with the VA and they're having issues, the best place for them to go possibly after they've kind of exhausted talking to the VA might be to reach out to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I can give you my contact information. You can put it on the website. You could post it in the Outlook, whatever. But it's not just me. It could be Senator McConnell's office. It could be Congressman Massey's office. All of your federal representatives have constituent services that do those things for the group. Also,
and it's not party affiliated. This is serving
absolutely.
The citizens, the government servicing the citizens.
Absolutely, absolutely. And all the federal delegation, there is a separation between campaign and official. And I'm on the official side. So we are not allowed to do anything campaign-wise while we're being paid by the Senate. So that's why you'll have, we have campaign workers, and then we have official workers. Now, on my weekends or evenings or time off and things like that, I can do campaign stuff, but I won't do it between, any normal business hours or things like that, because that is crossing the line and things. And that's one thing that they really stress is if you get in trouble, this is most likely what you will get in trouble for, because sometimes you forget. So that's why I have 2 phones. Mm-hmm. I have a political phone and a personal phone. So this is my Senate phone, my personal phone. I can talk politics on personal phones, but not on the Senate phone.
So have you ever had a conversation, you said, hey, can you hang up and dial
Absolutely.
me? That's
every time,
hilarious.
a lot of times, because on my business card, it's my Senate phone.
Uh-huh.
And so people will want to call and they'll ask, we'll talk about so-and-so's, their father's veterans benefits, and then they'll say, well, what do you think about the governor? And I say, well, you got to call me back on this number, and we can continue to talk or do whatever. So I have to go through that conversation every single time and explain. You got official, personal, personal politics. I can talk about anything, just not on each phone.
That's funny.
That's the way that goes.
Let me take my Outlook hat off real quick, put on my retired teacher hat, because one of the issues, and I may want to talk to you about this after the camera goes off, is that teachers are having, me personally, is something called the Windfall Act. And I reached out to Senator McConnell and Senator Paul's office in DC back in the fall, but I think they misunderstood what I was saying. The Windfall Act, the outlook here takes Social Security taxes out of my check every single week.
Yeah.
Because I get a retired teacher's pension, I can never, ever draw that Social Security money that I paid into.
Yes.
And that I can tell you with retired teachers and present teachers, that's a concern for us.
Absolutely.
So that would be something maybe we can talk later, and I can get one of those files started.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Also, I will say this, that there is a contingency of Northern Kentucky retired teachers that we as in the federal delegation, Senator Paul's office, Senator McConnell, Congressman Massey, we meet with the Northern Kentucky retired teachers group probably quarterly. And they bring those issues to us all the time, and we talk about those things all the time. So we are knowledgeable and know what's going on with the retired teachers. And a lot of those, that's a state-federal issue, and I've got to walk a fine line there too on my official side, because you can't really comment on state issues because we have no authority over state issues. And I just take that information, pass it up the line, or I refer people if they do come to me with a state issue. Like I got a call from a gentleman in Gallatin County the other day. He said Highway 42 between Warsaw and Carrollton is just awful and needs to be repaved. And I politely listened to him, and he was a fairly older gentleman, I could tell from his voice. And I listened politely to him and said, let him finish. And when it was over, I said, sir, I really appreciate you calling me, and I'm glad that you have my information, and I can help you in certain ways, but I cannot help you on this case because Highway 42 is a state highway. And I said, now if you have problems on Interstate 71, I said, you give me a call anytime. But 42, I said, I'll be more than happy to contact you or contact the local state road department in that area and let them know of your complaint or issue that you may have. But anything that I can do, I can't help personally on that issue. So there's a lot of times I have to explain the difference between a state issue or a federal issue, but also even county and local city ordinances. Mm-hmm. They want me to tell the senator to, you need to call the mayor and tell him to do this. And so, well, that's not really how government works. That's definitely not how Senator Paul's office works. But I appreciate you reaching out to me. I will let our DC and state office know what's going on. But we really can't help you in that case. A lot of times they don't like to hear that answer because they did reach out for help. But there are avenues and communication routes that just shouldn't be crossed, and we don't do that in our office.
Gotcha. Before we get started, Sam, can you check that to make sure? I heard it click, and I want to make sure it didn't turn itself off.
Oh gosh.
Because that was good stuff.
Yeah.
Does it still say record? All right, good. All right, so let's look at the national level. Republicans have been in charge of kind of Senate, House, presidency, both chambers at the state level as well as the governorship. How are you viewing how things are going nationally and federally on the Republican side? I'm gonna take a trip.
I think on the federal and state level, we are seeing we have had majority Republican control in both houses and at the executive branch for national and state politics. I think it's on the economic and the fiscal side, the money side. They're doing very well in both places. Both the governor's office and the president's office are removing legislation put in over the past, I will go back the past 20 years. I'm not necessarily, I don't think that everything that was done under even George W.'s administration was done correctly. I don't even think it was all actually very constitutional, certain areas like the Patriot Act and things like that. But I will say that the administrations now are kind of walking back a lot of those regulations, and we're seeing economic growth that we haven't seen in this country in decades. Maybe even in the past, well, I wouldn't know, since the 50s, since the post-war boom. And I mean, just look at the president was in West Virginia last night talking about the coal regulations and things like that. And coal is so important to Kentucky, not just eastern Kentucky, but coal is huge in western Kentucky. And it has been, it's been refreshing actually to see the president and the governor really care about the working people, like the Democratic Party has said they've always been for the working person. Well, these two administrations are actually talking more about like the blue-collar factory worker, the coal miner, the truck driver, and they're getting rid of a lot of the chains that has binded them from economic growth. Unemployment's down in both Kentucky and at the federal level. Jobs are coming back. Taxes, they've cut taxes. However, they need to cut spending as well. They've only done half their job, both the federal and the state level. And here's the, you can't cut an income and not cut outgoing, you know. So you've got to make more fiscal sense, and I hope that the state and level, or that the state and federal conservatives will cut spending. We have got to cut back on what is going out, especially since they cut what's coming in. So,
and that's an area you've not been necessarily pleased with, and watching with Donald Trump's presidency, that the spending is not necessarily
being cut.
Yeah.
It's not. But that's not so much the president. You know, the spending starts in the House, both state and federal levels. So the House has to cut the spending. They're the ones that's in charge of the purse. The Senate does more of the treaties and kind of confirmations and things like that. So the Senate can't do anything until the House sends something positive over when it comes to finances. So, and then the president said he'll sign anything that's positive like that. However, he did sign the increased spending bill last time, but he said he never will do that again. So we'll see, but the House has to give him something to sign.
Yeah, and how many times have politicians says, "I'll never do this again," and until the next time they give it.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you mentioned a comment that the president and the governor are talking about certain things, and that's a question that I wanted to raise. They both, Kentucky has a governor and a president who consistently goes onto social media and makes what seems to be not well received, but comments that almost everybody agrees they don't need to be making, that it doesn't help the political atmosphere, and sometimes they're just disrespectful, sometimes they're flat out rude, sometimes they are in response to things that have been said about them, but it seems like at times we've wanted our politicians to walk that line between they stick up for themselves, but they're not rude at the same time, and them two seem to not understand that at sometimes. Maybe at 4 a.m. in the morning when the best decisions are not being made.
I will say this, and that I think both the governor and the president, neither one of them are seasoned politicians. They have always spoken, you know, they have business backgrounds. They speak what they feel in order to get the best deal for who they represent, which has most of the time been their business. Now it's their country, their constituents, their commonwealth, and so they're just not seasoned. So they say what they think, which in business is a great thing to do. So everybody at the table knows what's going on. In politics, it's probably not the best thing to say what you think all the time. Now, with that being said, there are sometimes you can say too much, and so the governor and the president, I think sometimes they speak too much, but I will say this as well, you do know where they stand, always. So even though you might not like what they say, you don't have to second guess them on a lot of things. Here's a good example. The governor hasn't said whether or not he's running again next year. So it's like, here's something he's keeping people not confused but questioning, because he's not speaking. So it's interesting to see what he does speak on and what he doesn't speak on. So I think they're both calculated. They do know what they're doing, and they do it for a reason. But again, it's kind of refreshing to have some leaders that say what they think, even though you might not agree with what they've said.
Or the manner that they say.
Or that's
Yeah.
true too. You can tell, it's the old Southern thing. You tell someone, well, bless your heart, and really it doesn't mean that, but you can still say it that way, and it's sweet. It comes off as sweet, but
the underlying tone may not be that.
Yes, yeah. Again, exactly. There are ways that you can say things better. But today with social media and everything, if you type something out or make a post that says one thing, someone can still misconstrue that and take it the wrong way because you put a period or an exclamation point or a question mark instead of just a plain old period, something like that. So I think it also goes back to a lot of people just are so sensitive to politics right now that if you like someone, no matter what they say, you're going to be against it. If you don't like someone, no matter what you say, you're going to be against it. So it goes back to kind of don't have any prejudgments before you listen or take into consideration what someone says.
It's very similar of that when I being a teacher.
Yeah.
If you heard from other teachers at the beginning of the year that this kid that you were getting was a bad apple,
Yes.
there was a lot of times you saw that
Yeah.
behavior first before giving him a chance.
You're right.
But your radar was up for that.
You're right.
So, about a year ago, I wrote an In the Hammock in which I did some research about midterm elections. And historically, whatever, it doesn't matter the party of the president, but the party of the president lost seats in the Senate and the House in that first midterm election of their first, actually either term. I think there were two cases I went back to. Bill Clinton saw some increases in 98. And there was, but some of the people that parties love, JFK, his party lost seats. Ronald Reagan, his party lost seat. Obama, his party lost seat. Bush, and you just historically, it says that our voters are very fickle, and historically, the Republicans are going to lose seats here in 2 months.
Yeah.
So where do you kind of see that going, knowing that historically you probably should?
I think to be historical, the United States goes so back and reflects England's government and history. Americans are kind of weary of one party holding all the power.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't like being totally controlled by one person. That's why we fought the revolution to begin with. We want better representation. I think deep down inside, we really still feel that way, and it's kind of scary when one party has total control.
Well, I think you're right, and I think if I'm not mistaken, Obama, and during his first 2 years, Democrats controlled all three areas.
Yes.
And people were writing stories about the death of the Republican Party, and then 2 years later, the Republican Party took the House, I believe.
Well, that's when the Tea Party came to rise.
And the same way with W. The first 2 years, the Republicans controlled, and then the Democrats took it.
The House first, I believe, then the Senate. Yeah. But we have found that our government works fairly well when one party controls one place, one house, chamber, and then the other party controls the other chamber, the executive branch. I mean, that does work well, and that's the way our government is set up. However, and this is why I'm not like a real, I don't carry the Republican banner. I'll carry the conservative banner, but I won't carry the Republican banner because I don't believe the Republicans are correct 100% of the time. Now, I will say they're correct 90 to 95% of the time. There are a few things that I would like to see changed, but that's the difference between having a younger, a 35-year-old chairperson compared to a 60, 75-year-old chairperson who's been around the politics for a long time. But I will say this before I go any further. But every day I'm becoming more and more libertarian. I'm finding myself doing that. It's kind of funny. But back to the question. The parties, they need checks and balances. And if the Republicans run wild for too long, they deserve to lose. If the Democrats run wild for too long, they deserve to lose. I will not go so far as to say that the Republicans are running wild yet. Not yet. At the House, or at the state level or the federal level. I will say that things are changing to the positive in both cases. So I would like to see that continue on again, to keep continuing over the next election cycle, maybe the next 4 years, maybe 6 years with the re-election of the president. As of right now, I don't see that he's done anything that deserves losing his second term if he chooses so to run. But I say that, but I also will say this: I don't think that there's going to be a blue wave. Now, anything can happen. Mm-hmm. I went to bed 2 years ago believing that Hillary Clinton was going to win. In my heart, I wanted Donald Trump to win, mm-hmm. but I thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. And woke up the next morning about 3 a.m. and saw on TV that, holy shnikes, Trump won the presidency. You know, it was great.
You know, it was interesting on that. I did the same thing. I went to bed thinking Hillary Clinton's going to be the next president. Yeah. And my wife, a female, was insistent through the whole thing she's not going to win. And she kept on saying, I'm telling you, women will not vote for her. And by golly, my wife was right.
I think there should be a study on that as well, because I obviously supported Senator Paul mm-hmm. when he ran for president. I was hoping that he would do well. But my grandmother was the first person in my family to say, no, I like Donald Trump and I'm going to support him. And that, I thought, oh, Grandma, you kind of don't know what you're talking about. You're out of date, you're out of touch, you don't know. But wow, was she right? And I don't say that very often. But Grandma was right. And it was shocking. And I thought, oh, I'm the Politico, I know what's going on, and this can't happen, this won't happen. But my prediction is there's not going to be a blue wave in November. There might be a little blue ripple, but I don't think the Republicans will lose the Senate. I don't think they'll lose the House. I think they'll pick up seats in the Senate, actually. They may lose seats in the House, which, there's 400, so if you lose, you got to do really well to continue to grow on that. And I don't think under the leadership of the Speaker of the House right now, Paul Ryan. I don't think under Paul Ryan's leadership he's done that great. I feel like he's fought the president on a lot of things more than what he should have. But if a lot of them would just get out of the way, stuff, and that's Republicans and Democrats, stuff would fix itself.
Gotcha.
That's the way the market's supposed to do it.
Well, the state. Well, actually, I don't want to talk about the state. We've been talking a while. One of the issues we talked a little bit about before the camera came on is that you have your national Republican and Democrat Party that have issues that they're focusing on and fighting for. But at the local level, those issues that are such a cry at the federal level really don't affect the local level.
Yeah.
So what is the difference between Republicans and Democrats at the local level?
It depends. It depends on where you're from. I mean, we're here in northern Kentucky. We're on the southern side of northern Kentucky, the rural side. We have 10,000 registered voters. Boone County has 100,000, I think. Somewhere near 100,000, maybe it's 80, something like that. Their economy, just 50 miles to the northwest from here in Falmouth, their economy is so different than here. Their governmental structure is so different than here in Falmouth and Pendleton County. So I'm only going to speak from here, the Pendleton County aspect of it. I think the difference is pretty much it's generational. If your grandpa was a Democrat, you're a Democrat. If your father was a Republican, you're probably going to be a Republican. There are a few cases where you have that rebellious child who, the preacher's kid syndrome. You might do something different just because your daddy did the opposite. You don't want to follow. You don't want to do the same thing. But for the most part, here in the rural area, you vote for the person you like. You vote for the person you know, you went to Sunday school with, or graduated high school with, or maybe they're an incumbent and they've done certain things in your community that you agree with, whether they're opposition party or not. And you're going to vote for that person because you've seen benefit for you, for your family, for your community. So I will say that here in the rural area. But I also know that there's other rural areas that you will not, if you're running as the minority party, you will never be elected because the community just doesn't vote that way. I think Pendleton County's changed in the past 10 years. I will say that we talked about our registrations last night. The Democratic Party in the county is just a little over 5,000 now, and the Republican Party is a little over 4,000. So 10 years ago it was 6-3, So we're doing, the registrations are changing. And also, the greatest thing that ever happened to the Kentucky Republican Party is Barack Obama. Under his administration, so many, everybody knew that came in to the registration came in as a Republican. They didn't know what Obama was doing, but they knew that Obama's policies weren't working. So they didn't want to be in the party of Obama. They didn't want to be in the failing economic system under his presidency. So when they registered, come in at 18, they knew their parents didn't like Obama. They didn't like Obama, so they're registering as a Republican. I think that's one of the main reasons Kentucky is turned red and turning red. Grant County, for example, our neighbor to the west, there are 100 registrations difference between the Republicans and Democrats. And 20 years ago, you wouldn't have ever imagined that the Republicans would catch up in Grant County. But today, the Republicans are somewhere right around 100 registrations from flipping that county. And everyone, I think every seat in Grant County is Republican held, maybe except I think one. I don't remember if it's the attorney or the clerk or there's one Democrat left in Grant County, but the Republicans are working, and you find that in all the local parties. A lot of the leadership in the local Republican parties are under 40 years old. The chair people, I know, Campbell counties, Pendleton, Bracken, Grant. Owen County was, but I know she just stepped down. And there's another one. Whatever. There's another party, Republican Party in Northern Kentucky that their chairwoman is under 40 years old. The Democrat side, if you look at their executive committees, they're aged. They're over 40. And I think that kind of just it shows you the future of what the party is looking to. The Republican Party is newer, younger, and it's the new thing. We haven't had Republicans in office in a lot of these places, so it's like, well, this is new, this is cool, this is something different. And
do you fear that something new and different, that luster is going to wear off?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But it took 100 years for the Democrats to kind of wear off. And what happened was, if they're doing well, there's no reason for it to wear off. But I think in the past decade in Frankfort, the Democrats look more like Democrats from New York or California, not Democrats from Paducah or Pikeville or Somerset, and the Democratic Party went further and further to the left, and that's just not the standards of a Kentucky Politico. Don't preach Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer because we don't want to hear those types of things.
Okay. Well, tell us about, kind of finish up, you've got a whole slate of Republican candidates running for local office, as well as we have state and federal offices. Go ahead and take a minute, and what do you, let's start with the federal and state. All right, you've got Massey and Seth Hall.
Yes.
With Massey running for to be reelected. You have Will Schroeder and Rachel Roberts. You have Mark Hart, Pendleton County boy, versus Greg Colson as a Harrison County boy. Both with strong ties in public education. Greg Colson's in-laws are teachers. Mark Hart's wife and sister are teachers. So tell us something about those three races.
Well, first off, I'd like to say that this is a historic year for Republican elections in Pendleton County. We have almost an entire slate of Republican candidates. We do have an entire slate for the fiscal court. Every seat on the fiscal court, including the judge, all four magistrates are being challenged by Republicans.
Wait, is Alan Welly a Republican?
He is.
Okay, okay, because I knew he didn't have competition.
Yes, and
Okay.
he's the only sure thing as of right now.
And that kind of hits back to your point that locally, you don't necessarily look at party, you look at Alan Welly. I know Alan Welly, didn't know what party is.
Yes,
I talked to him
yeah.
all the time, but
Yeah.
really didn't know if he was Democrat or Republican.
Yeah,
Just knew he's a good guy.
Again, at the local level, the county, you really don't draw lines on the political Republican or Democrat. You think more on where they're from, who their family is, how long have I known that person, and that sort of stuff. But so it as the chairperson, it does get hard to kind of try to pick favorites and say that one person is better than the other person. It's like I might have known the Democrat my whole life and know that person is a great person, but then I'm supposed to support the Republican just because he's a Republican. I really don't go that far as to say that. Am I a good chairman? Maybe. Does somebody else want this job? Maybe. Can they have it? Maybe. It doesn't matter to me. I'm just going to do my best to help who needs to be helped, who will do the best job. But with that being said, it's a historical event this year, a historic election. We've got Republicans running in a lot of races, and we're already looking forward for the next 4 years as well. I mean, there's some people in the courthouse that might not be around for their election, might want to retire or get out, things like that. So for the past 4 years, we've been planning for this time, and so we're already planning for 4 years ahead to even get more candidates next time. But I think Will Schroeder and Mark Hart have done great jobs. To go back to Frankfurt, both of their challengers are not. They don't know how Frankfurt works. Will and Mark have the experience, and not only do they have the experience, they've taken tough votes. They've been down there in a very difficult time, and they voted what's best for their people. Where they represent Mark Hart, the 78th House District, and Senator Schroeder in the 24th Senate District. And even at that, I mean, it's kind of, it's hard for them to even vote together on a lot of things because their constituency is different, with Will representing more of Northern Kentucky ideas and Mark's being like a Central Kentucky district. That's one thing I would love to see in the next few years when they redistrict things in Frankfurt, is to kind of put our districts more aligned, whether it's Senate or House or something like that, so we get better representation for what happens in the House and the Senate, because the way it is right now, with a Central Kentucky House and a Northern Kentucky Senate, they might not always agree on what's best. And here in Pendleton County, we're kind of stuck in the middle of that. So, you know.
Well, and if you look at Will's district, Will and Rachel Roberts, who carries Northern Kentucky most is probably going to win that election.
Yes. Yeah.
Where in Mark's case, the votes are less from Scott County and Harrison County, so Pendleton County votes have more of a say in that election for the Mark Hart, Greg Colson race than it does the Will Schroeder, Rachel Roberts.
Yeah, we offset a little bit more in the House race than we do the Senate race. I mean, Campbell County's got 60,000 registered voters, and again, we have 10, so we have to get everybody and their brother to vote just to be a percentage of the Campbell County vote, you know, and so it can be difficult for that. But again, I think Will and Mark have both handled themselves very well, have represented Pendleton County very well, and not just the Republicans, but all the constituents when it comes to taking votes on the pensions and tax reform and all that sort of stuff.
Well, what about the Seth Hall, Thomas Massey race?
I love Thomas Massey. I love Thomas Massey. He comes back to Northern Kentucky in the 4th District, which goes almost from Ashland along the Ohio River up to Northern Kentucky and back down the Ohio River to the eastern suburbs of Louisville. You talk about a district that the constituents are different from one side to the other. He has an odd-shaped district, but it was the first congressional district in Kentucky to switch to Republican. So it's a very conservative district. But Thomas comes back, the congressman comes back to Northern Kentucky and talks about not playing the politics in D.C. He said under John Boehner's watch as the speaker, you only got to be chairpeople of important committees if you would donate or could raise so much money for the party. And Thomas told him to go pound salt. We're not going to do that down here, you know. So you're not going to own me. I'm going to vote the way my people want me to vote. And he comes back and tells those stories all the time. How and not only does he tell those stories, he tells it in just a way that it appeals to the common man, the simple man. You know, he's just a farm boy from Lewis County. He would rather talk about raising his cattle or pruning his peach trees or something like that than talk about what's going on in D.C. And
so you're saying he's probably been in a stripping room too?
I'm sure he's been in a stripping room a time or two before. Yeah, the tobacco stripping room.
Tobacco stripping room.
Room.
Well, let's look at the local level. You had mentioned the fiscal court. Alan Whaley, of course, we've already said unopposed, so he'll be returning for another term.
Yeah.
And then the other 3 seats, the interesting competition. 6 good individuals.
Yes.
6 individuals that I consider to talk positively about all 6.
Yeah. Well, great. We've got. You're talking about the magistrate races,
yes,
the 6 magistrates candidates. We've got some interesting candidates. We've got some different dynamics. That we had our Republican meeting last night, and you compare Josh Plummer in District 2. And Darren Gregg in District 3, Alan Whaley in District 1, and Stephen D. Foster in District, who he did not write My Old Kentucky Home, but he's the same name. He is in District 4. You put all those guys together, you've got businessmen, you've got business owners, you've got Alan with a medical background, you have got Stephen Foster he's a retired police officer. I mean, it's a great. And then Darren, you know, he's a bus driver. He's a farmer. He is the picture of the common man, you know. So you've got all these demographics that would make up one great fiscal court. They all have a different perspective. It is true, you know. Steve Foster, he's from Northern Kentucky. He's lived down here about a decade, I think. Works in Cynthiana. But he has an outsider's perspective that is really interesting, very fiscally conservative, and he's got this perspective. He's got different eyes that like you and I would have from being lifelong residents here. So he says, why do you guys do that? You know, he'll ask questions. Why do you guys do it that way? And it makes us sit and think like, well, we've always done it that way. And that's not a bad answer, but that's not the right answer either. The right answer would be because that's the best way to do it. Well, if you're not questioned like that every once in a while, it becomes white noise. You lose focus on that one topic. We had some great discussions last night about the planning and zoning and why the Pendleton County does certain things with agriculture and economic development and things like that. And we really, again, Steve brought up some great points like, well, other places do it this way. And so he can speak knowledgeable with an understanding that it works like this somewhere else. And we don't know that because we've never seen it like that. So I think Steve does bring a great perspective to it. Darren's ran a couple times. He's been very close a couple times. Just a few votes. I think 4 votes one time. And you gotta like that tenacity. Just continue to come back, and he's a pretty honest guy. He will tell you what needs to be said, whether you want to hear it or not.
Yeah, if you want to know his opinion, ask him. And you better be ready to have his opinion. And you know what? At times, I love that honesty.
Yes. Yeah.
Like you said, you know exactly what you're.
It's kind of like the president and the governor. You know where they stand, whether you like it or not. Just depends on how they tell you. But again, and Allen, he's running unopposed. So Josh Plummer, the second district, I guess he's the only one I've not talked about. I've known Josh.
And what 2 great candidates.
Oh,
and him
yeah,
and Denny Gosney.
Yeah, great candidates.
I've known them a long time. 2 great families.
Yes.
We talked about that, and I'm sure you'll get into it. We'll talk about the judge. 2 great families, 2 great young men there too also. I say young man for David because we're in the same class, and then I can claim I'm young, which I'm not.
Well, it's all right. I call everybody young man, so it's all right. Josh Plummer, again, I've known him my whole life. He grew up in Peach Grove. His mother moved to the south central end of the county.
That's Peach Grove for all of Pendleton County, except for those in Peach Grove. Then it's just the Grove.
The Grove, yeah, the Grove, the Grove, God's country.
I grew up in the Grove.
So Josh grew up like his grandfather and my grandfather were great friends. His father and my mother grew up together. It's a generational thing. You don't know just that person. You know that family's history and their story, and you've heard about them, their families struggling right along with your families during the Depression, during the hard times, during war, and so that builds a bond that you can go out and make new friends, but it's hard to find people that you love that you're not technically blood related to, but you're their family. So Josh is just a great guy. I love him and his wife and their 2 children, and again, he's got a younger idea of what Pendleton County could and should be like. He and I were discussing last night. He said, "Why does Alexandria have more than us?" And the answer is, a few decades ago, the leadership here didn't have the same vision as the leadership in Alexandria, or the leadership in Cynthiana, or Williamstown, or anything like that. Josh has that fresh take on what things should be like. And with age, or with youth, comes energy, and you got to be willing to do the work, not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. And I think Josh definitely has that. And he won't accept the type of answer that's like, why do you do it that way? Just because that's the way we do it. That's not the type of person Josh Plummer would be. So.
What about the other ranges? I'm going to mention the judge exec. I think the county attorney is contested.
Yes, county attorney.
Is that the only 2?
You're asking me hard questions here. So the judge, I think the county attorney, So there's no PBA, no county clerk, no circuit clerk, no jailer. I think those are the 4 that's uncontested.
There's county surveyor too.
A surveyor, yeah, but that's not there. I think that's uncontested. Right?
Yes.
That's
yeah.
Howard Johnson.
Yeah.
And he is a Republican.
Okay.
And I've never met him. I've never met him.
So what about the 2? The judge exec, David Fields returning or looking to return
Yes.
for a second term against Craig Peoples, who's been sheriff in the county for a
For a
while.
long time.
And then you have, I don't even know, is Jeff Dean or Massaning?
Jeff Dean.
Who's a Republican?
Jeff Dean is the Democrat, the
Okay.
incumbent, and Stacey Standing is the Republican challenger. This year was the first year I've met Stacey. She's been very. Stacey is. I don't know how I want to say this. She's new as well. She's got some great ideas. I don't want to comment on her age. I don't know how old she is or anything, so I don't want to call her young or older. But she's been involved in the Republican Party. Now, I do want to say this. I do think there's a couple races that should not be politically. Should be nonpartisan. You know, the mayor and the council races and stuff. They're nonpartisan. I don't think that like a county attorney or a jailer or a sheriff should be partisan at all. Even the PBA and the clerks, why are they partisan? Because those races, they don't really make policy. Look at the sheriff; he does what the law tells him he has to do. You know, so why do you have to vote for a Republican or a Democrat? If they follow the law, they're going to be a Republican or Democrat. You know, so I think the policymakers, which would be the judge and the fiscal court, that's fine with them being partisan, but the other ones should really be nonpartisan. You know, the county attorney, again, they have to follow what the fiscal court and the Constitution of Kentucky tell them they have to do. You know, and so what's that matter if you're a Republican or Democrat? But again, I think Stacey would do a great job as the county attorney. And she's been practicing here in Pendleton County for a few years now, and she's been involved in the party, been to some events, and been supportive. The judges race, I think the judges race and the sheriff's race are going to be the 2